Hello, good afternoon. My name is Laird and welcome to the Laird Report. In this episode, I would like to do a slightly different approach and leave the war in Ukraine for a moment to talk about something which has recently happened in Scotland, which may be of some interest and some comic relief. In Scotland, the government of Scotland is run by effectively one individual called Nicola Sturgeon. She has basically got a pack of advisors who help her, and they all come under the umbrella of the Scottish SNP government. These people are, well, not the brightest people in the world. I think that's what we could basically say and be quite certain that's the case. For example, Nicola Sturgeon has apologised to people who have been accused of witchcraft. Now, this has been touted as a formal apology for people accused of witchcraft between the 16th and the 18th centuries. Well, I don't know how these people are going to accept that apology since every single one of them is dead. Yeah. Previously in Scotland, and like in most countries, as civilization progresses, what we should remember is that we have left behind periods in our history where things were less civilized, where people were less enlightened, and during the 16th and the 18th centuries, there certainly is a case for saying that perhaps Scotland was not the enlightened country that we thought it was. The idea of the witchcraft trials was part of a kind of religious persecution type idea, where those people in power would seek to effectively find themselves a scapegoat. And the trials were a bit, I suppose you could describe the trials as a bit like the Roman arena, where the Christians were thrown to the lions. But on International Women's Day, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, on behalf of the Scottish Government, says that she's choosing to acknowledge the egregious historical injustice and extend a formal posthumous apology to all those accused, convicted and vilified and executed under the Witchcraft Act of 1563. Well, in those days there was a Scottish Parliament, and just like today, that Scottish Parliament is run by crackpots. Yeah? The only difference is that these crackpots are not gentry. These are your genuine middle class people who basically create an air of mystery about them as somehow being defenders of the working class people. That is a load of nonsense. Yeah. Left-wing politicians see working class people as basically, well, how would you describe it? They basically see them as voter fodder, voter catches. And that's why you get politicians from parties of the left which will go along to minority groups and make a pitch specifically to them in the same room, excluding all others. And I actually think that Nicola Sturgeon, who regularly involves herself with woke and minority groups, actually does Scotland quite a disservice, because at the end of the day, everybody is supposed to be equal in Sturgeon land and everybody is supposed to be the same. But when you have like special little events for special little people, then what you get is a divided country which has no hope of getting back together again. Yeah? Of course, a divided country is not just the the niche of the SNP in terms of how it operates politically. You can actually see this in other parties of the left, and I think that's one of the biggest failings, because what basically happens is that discrimination is allowed to flourish under the catch-all of positive discrimination. Well, positive discrimination is exactly what it is, simply discrimination. Now, although Nicola Sturgeon has apologised about the Witchcraft Act of 1653, it reminds you of other nonsense which happens in the world, where women effectively don't get the chance to have their voices heard, and they're reduced to the level of being second-class citizens. Well, instead of going forward, the kind of momentum in this country, I suppose, is to take us backwards, and especially women, in terms of women's rights, which is why we have the real issue coming forward that upsets an awful lot of women in this country, and that is the Gender Recognition Act and the debate that surrounds that. Well, basically, the Gender Recognition Act, the upgrades that are going to be made by the SNP, are in fact pretty ridiculous. A while ago there was a guest on Question Time, Robert Winston, who is an eminent scientist and speaker, and he was talking about the fact that a person cannot change their sex. Well, under the kind of like the SNP, they want to basically allow anybody to identify themselves as either sex, and there are actually only two sexes. You can either be born as a man, or you can be born as a woman. Now, at the end of the day, if you take enhanced drugs, you're seen as a cheat when you do sport events like Olympics, etc., etc. And there's certainly a case for that is some form of cheating, because people recognise that taking drugs for things like sports to enhance abilities, etc., etc., is entirely wrong. But nothing is actually said about taking someone who identifies as now a female and allows them to compete in female sports when previously they were a woman. A man. Or is it a woman? I don't know. I mean, well, actually, I'm only kidding on there, because really, a man calling himself a woman, competing in women's sports when they still have male physiology, is not what many people would describe as a woman. For example, let's say, for example, I decided to change my race, which currently is not an accepted doctrine. But I could, supposing I decided to turn around and say, I identify as a black woman. Well, the woke community would be willing to accept the fact that I can identify as a woman, but it wouldn't. The same community wouldn't get behind me to identify as black. Similarly, if I decided that I wanted to self-identify as, say, perhaps a tractor, people would look at me, they would smile a little smile, and they would say that I was absolutely nuts. And that's, I think, one of the things that a lot of people seem to have in the trans debate, is that so a man who puts on a dress and calls himself a woman isn't, according to a lot of people, a woman, that they still remain a man. But in this country, the political class, which is dominated by the LGBT community, has basically controlled many of the political parties of the left, which is why the amount of opposition from the political class seems to be limited to parties who are more tended to be described as right wing. For example, the Scottish Conservatives have been standing up for Scottish women, whereas parties like the Scottish Greens, parties like the Scottish National Party, and parties like the Labour Party, they are basically all signed up to the woke agenda, which obviously includes this trans issue. One thing I'd like to say is that women are not going to be comfortable about going into their private spaces and then suddenly find that a person who was born as a male can just walk in wearing a dress or a wig, or perhaps maybe a shaven head and a moustache and a big beard like Billy Connolly, and suddenly walk up to a locker in a women's female changing room and start stripping off and getting naked. Could you imagine if you were a parent and perhaps maybe your little 8-year-old daughter walked into a female changing room to find males walking about with their dick hanging out? That, of course, would be the female penis and not to be confused with the male penis. Personally, I've asked on Twitter on numerous occasions what is the difference between a male penis and a female penis, but so far no one from the LGBT community has decided to come along and educate me on that matter. Well, as Scotland slips down, one remedy that could cure everything in Scotland of the scourge of nationalism is, of course, nuclear war. If World War III does break out, and we're certainly heading towards that goal, NATO's just decided to give fighter jets to the Ukrainians. The big issues that concern the political class of Scotland could soon become completely irrelevant because we could all end up as burnt ash. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, it depends on how you view it. People expect society to have certain standards, but at the present moment, because of the divisions in society, Scotland is walking backwards. It's not running backwards because obviously that's a little bit dangerous, but it's certainly walking backwards. And when we have people like Nicola Sturgeon in charge, when we have minority interests controlling a parliament, that must be a very bad thing for society as a whole. Everybody should be treated equally. But if somebody who wants to be treated more equally than others gets enough political backing, that surely must be wrong. Our society in Scotland is collapsing. It's collapsing economically, it's collapsing politically, and the same people who have caused all the problems over decades are still in place. The new people that's came in are of the same mindset, and therefore they are just as dangerous as the ones that went before, because the ones that have came in now are basically of the same mentality and signed up to the same nonsense agenda. So, there are lots of real problems in Scotland. One of those problems was not apologising to people that are already dead, that died in the 16th and the 18th century. That is a complete waste of parliamentary time. It's a complete waste of a politician's time. And at the end of the day, it shows you the mindset of why you should think. Stop and think before you cast your vote for any party. Now, at the end of the day, a person is free to vote for who they want. But if you keep voting in idiots all the time, then your society, your community, and perhaps maybe you personally will one day be affected by these idiots and what they have done. So I would say that any party that signed up to various types of woke nonsense and agendas are not people that you should vote for. They are dangerous and they're stupid, and they should be removed from public office and barred for life. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and taking the time to listen to my views, and I hope to see you soon watching the Laird Report. My name is George Laird, and this is the Laird Report. Thanks for watching.